Hey everybody, new video, new camera angle, you know how it is. I've been dying to make this video for a while, and now I can because a whole bunch of stuff is coming together all at once, and I got a bunch of really cool news, including another chance for you to get your name in the game's credits, which I'll get to in a second. But first, Polymino is 75% off on Steam right now. That's only $3 American, so go out and buy yourself a copy. Maybe buy 2 copies. Buy 10 copies. It's still cheaper than Tetris Effect. So the biggest thing I have to announce right now, the thing that I was waiting on before I could announce all this other stuff, is that Polymino's Versus mode, Junk Attack, is now entering public beta with the latest update. And if you're already following development, you might be wondering, wasn't it already in open beta? And yeah, technically it was, but practically speaking, it really wasn't, because first of all, you had to switch to the beta branch on Steam to access it, and then once you did that, there wasn't any in-game information on how the mode worked. But now, that's all changed with the latest update. Not only is Junk Attack always enabled, you don't have to switch to the beta branch anymore. There's also help all over the place in the game. There's a new guide on the mode in the help menu. There are a whole bunch of help buttons and blue question mark buttons. In the settings menu for Junk Attack, you can press a help hotkey on any of the options to get information about it. There's help every step of the way. We're in the information era, baby. And speaking of the information era, Polymino's wiki has also been updated. In fact, I haven't even said on my YouTube channel before that Polymino has a website at polymino.net, and it also has a wiki. And no, I did not use fandom. All my homies hate fandom. For you, I made the wiki from scratch, baby. That's right, no ads, no obnoxious auto-playing videos, no super long load times. We just cut right to the chase. We get right to the information. All of the information you need to play the game is actually in the game. But if you want to read all that information in a more sort of easier to read format, or you want to see some more advanced information, or you want to learn how to mod the game, then the wiki is the place for you. Was it a good idea to spend my time writing a bunch of detailed articles about modding this game when I don't know if there's any interest in doing it yet? Sure. Don't worry about it. Just don't worry. Now, to get back to that whole getting your name in the credits thing, what's happening is I'm going to be hosting a playtesting session for Junk Attack in Polymino's Discord server. I've done this a couple times already, and it's always been really helpful because Junk Attack is a versus mode, so if you want to test out the game balance, you obviously need people playing against each other. So these playtesting sessions are a lot of fun. They're really helpful, and everyone who participates gets their name in the credits. There are already people who have their name in the credits from the previous sessions, so get in that Discord server. The way that this is going to work is 3 days after this video goes live, I'm going to start a poll in the Discord server where everybody can vote and select which days they're available over the next week, and then we'll choose the one with the most people available and have the playtesting session then. And if you join the Discord server too late to participate in the poll, but you do join before the playtesting session, you're more than welcome to just drop in. The more the merrier. So Junk Attack has been around on the beta branch for a while, but it's never really had a proper public introduction, so that's what I want to do right now. And obviously I'm hoping this video will reach people who haven't played Polymino before, so if you're one of those people, allow me to quickly explain the basics of the game to you so the rest of this video isn't insanely confusing. So you have blocks and you have junk pieces, and junk pieces get constantly added to your board and you need to stop your board from filling up. So what you do is you move around the blocks on your board, you match up 3 of the same color, and when you do that, it removes the blocks from your board, which makes some more room, and it also launches projectiles in the same direction as the match you made. If those projectiles hit any junk pieces, the junk pieces shatter into more blocks, which you can use to make more matches and destroy more junk, and that's the basic gameplay loop of Polymino. One more important detail is that junk pieces can be gray, in which case you can destroy them with any projectile, or they can have a color, in which case you have to destroy them with projectiles of the same color, and the projectile color depend on the blocks you match up. Another important mechanic is bombs. You can use bombs to destroy regular blocks and junk pieces as well. And the last thing I want to mention is the quick drop button, which makes the next junk piece fall immediately. Obviously, normally this makes the game harder, but in Junk Attack mode, you get rewarded for using the quick drop button, which is why I mention it now. And now you're all up to speed, so we can get into the new features introduced in the junk attack mode. So the overall goal of junk attack is to outlast your opponents, and there are some new mechanics which make it more of a direct competition. For example, if you chain together long combos, it'll make the junk pieces drop faster for your opponents, so they'll have to scramble to keep up with you. Pretty standard type of thing for puzzle games. But the real meat of junk attack is in the abilities and loadouts. There are a couple variations of junk attack's rules, but the one with loadouts is the one that's the most fleshed out, so that's the one I'll be talking about. So a loadout is a set of 3 abilities which are designed to synergize with each other and basically encourage a particular play style. Most loadouts have a sort of gimmick to them for how you're supposed to use it to take out your opponents. Abilities can have a wide range of effects, and most of them revolve around junk in some way. So some abilities transfer junk from your board to your opponent, some of them spawn junk in your opponent's boards. They can also apply modifiers which are unique to junk attacks, so they can make junk bomb proof, for example. They can make junk immune to everything except bombs. They can also set it up so that the junk will explode once it's destroyed, or launch a bunch of projectiles in random directions when it's destroyed. To use your abilities, you fill this ability meter by building combos, destroying junk pieces, and using the quick drop button. The meter has 3 segments, one for each ability, and once a segment is full, you can hold down the bomb button to charge up whichever segment you want to use, and then release it to activate the ability. To use bombs in junk attack, you also need to use the ability meter. It usually requires about half as much meter as the cheapest ability in your loadout. So now we can get to the real fun part of this video, which is talking about all the loadouts, their gimmicks, how you might use them to destroy your enemies. So the first loadout in the game is called Bomb Drainer, and the idea behind it is that you fill your opponent's board with junk that can only be destroyed by bombs, so that they have to waste all of their ability meter to keep their board clear. The first ability in this loadout is actually a bomb with a unique shape. It's a cross shape. It extends in all 4 directions to the edges of the board. You can use it to take out more blocks and junk than normal. The second ability in this loadout is a junk transfer, but not only does it take junk from your board and move it to your opponent's, it also makes it bomb only when it does that, so it can only be destroyed by bombs. And the third ability is called a transfer bomb. So this is like a regular bomb, except any junk that gets touched by it gets moved to your opponent's boards instead of getting destroyed. And this transfer bomb also makes any junk that it transfers bomb only. So you can potentially hit 4 or 5 junk pieces with this bomb, make all of them immune to projectiles, and then transfer them to your opponents. The next loadout is called Bomb Proof, and it's kind of a similar idea, but it goes about it differently. So obviously this one revolves around junk that can't be destroyed by bombs. Normally that wouldn't be super difficult to deal with, but it has a trick up its sleeve for its third ability. So with this loadout, you're actually supposed to use the second ability to set up the first one. So the second ability makes 3 junk pieces in your own board bomb-proof, and then the first ability will transfer 1 bomb-proof junk piece to your opponent. Technically, the abilities are a lot more fine-tuned than this, like the junk transfer will transfer any other junk if you don't have anything bomb-proof, and the ability which makes your own junk bomb-proof will prioritize junk that you'll want to get rid of with the first ability, so larger junk pieces, pieces that already have another negative modifier that'll be replaced by the bomb-proof, stuff like that. But the third ability is the real kicker with this one, and I actually have to talk about 2 new types of junk piece, which are only available in junk attack. There's the junk row, which is just a 10-block wide row of junk, and then there is tiny junk, which is a junk piece that is a single block. And these things are way more difficult to deal with than you might think, because first of all, even though they're a single block, they are still junk pieces, so you can't move them. You have to hit them with a projectile to get rid of them, and they're a single block, so it's really hard to do that. So with that in mind, the third ability for the bomb-proof loadout spawns 2 junk rows at the bottom of your opponent's board, but it applies a junk effect where every single block in a junk piece is converted into one of those tiny junk pieces, and they're bomb-proof, so that can be a real pain to deal with. Now, if you want to reclaim the bottom 2 rows of your board, you're gonna have to hit 20 junk pieces with projectiles. Now, for both of the loadouts we've spoken about so far, it might seem like the third ability is really harsh, but actually during playtesting, we found that more aggression is generally the best way to go for these loadouts to make it feel more like an actual versus mode. Next up, we got M.A.D, Mutually Assured Destruction. So the first ability in this loadout is just a straightforward junk transfer. The second ability is where this loadout's theme of mutually assured destruction starts to get a bit more apparent. This ability increases everybody's difficulty by 5 for a limited time, and that includes the person who uses it. And then the third ability spawns 3 rows of junk at the bottom of everyone's board, again including the person who uses it. So the idea for this loadout is you wait until an opportune moment when your opponents are close to losing and you're in a pretty comfortable position, and then you make everybody's life harder at the same time and hope that you can outlast them. This next one is called Petrification, and its ability meter actually has a pretty unusual structure. The ability at the bottom of the meter is actually very strong. The other 2 abilities are really only meant to be used after you've used the first one at least once, and the layout of this ability meter is also supposed to give your opponents at least a little bit of time between you using the first ability and either of the other 2. The first one is a junk transfer, but it fragments it, and the other 2 abilities are meant to make this junk even more difficult to deal with. The second ability chooses 1 random color, and it makes every junk piece on your opponent's board that color. So you're going to need a lot of blocks of that particular color to destroy them all. The third ability only targets single block junk pieces on your opponent's board, but not only does it make them all 1 color, it also makes them bomb proof. So if your opponent took too long to deal with all those tiny junk pieces, now they're going to have a really rough time. That's why the ability meter here is laid out in the way that it is. As the person using the loadout, you want to use the first ability, maybe even a few times, and then one of the other 2 abilities to really seal your opponent's fate. Whereas if you're playing against this loadout, as soon as that first ability gets used on you, the clock is ticking and you need to get rid of that junk and maybe waste a bunch of bombs to do so before your opponent can make them bomb proof. Next up, we got Q Assault. This one revolves around the junk queue. I didn't mention this yet, but pretty much all of the different effects I've been talking about so far can actually happen to junk while it's still in the queue. The first ability is a junk transfer, but it actually takes a junk piece from your queue and moves it to your opponent. And the second and third ability are actually kind of similar to the Petrification one we just spoke about. They're in a different order though. The third ability will take all of the junk pieces in your opponent's queue and change their shape. There are a couple more unique junk shapes that only appear in Junk Attack here. They're pretty standard though. There's a 2x2 piece, which is generally something you want to have, and a 4x4 piece, which is huge and you generally don't want to have it. This loadout actually kind of subverts that. It makes all of the junk in your opponent's queue that 2x2 shape. The reason it does that is because it then proceeds to fragment all of them, as you probably guessed. Now, the second ability will, again, target all the junk in your opponent's queue, and it'll make it all 1 color, and it'll make it bomb-proof. The goal of the third ability is to put your opponent in a dilemma. They can either quick drop all of that junk immediately and hopefully it won't screw them over, or they can hope that it'll take you a while to earn your second ability, but risk you changing all of that tiny junk in their queue into bomb-proof junk that's all the same color. So the reason the order of those 2 abilities are swapped for this one is because your opponent can just immediately quick drop all of them. But if they don't, or they can't, you can make that junk a whole lot more difficult to deal with. Finally, we have a couple which are a bit more experimental. So this one's called Sniper, and the idea is to make charging up the ability meter part of the skill behind this loadout. So the first ability is a very standard junk transfer. The second ability costs a whole bunch of meter, and it spawns 5 junk rows for your opponent. So that is a lot to deal with. In this case, the junk rows are just regular junk, so they are really easy to destroy, but having 50 blocks added to your board is no joke. The third ability sucks. It's a junk modifier. It makes all of the junk on your own board gray, so it has some use, right? It makes it easier to destroy the junk on your board. The idea here is that you have to hold down the bomb button for a really long time to use that second ability, but if you hold it down much longer, now you're going to be forced to use the third ability, which is way worse. Like I said, that one's a lot more experimental. We'll have to see how it goes. This next one is also pretty experimental. It's called Sabotage. The idea is to load your opponent's board up with junk that will detonate when it's hit with a projectile. Now, at first you might think, is it really a bad thing if my opponent just wipes out all the junk on my board? That doesn't sound so bad. I thought it was going to be a positive ability too until we play tested it. So it turns out when a junk piece gets destroyed and it blows up a whole bunch of nearby blocks and doesn't leave behind any blocks of its own, it really sucks because it deprives you of a whole bunch of blocks. Because you can't forget, the only way you get more blocks on your board is by destroying junk. It's not like Tetris Attack where your board is constantly moving up and having more blocks added to it. So junk is your enemy, but you also depend on it. And if somebody were to remove all of the junk from your board and also destroy nearby blocks too, that can actually be really devastating. So this loadout has 2 abilities which cause that effect to happen to your opponents. So one of these abilities applies the explosive junk modifier to 5 junk pieces on your opponent's board. The other one is actually a global on-shatter effect, anything that happens when you destroy a junk piece. I call them on-shatter effects. So in this case, for a limited time, all of your opponent's junk is treated as having the explode on shatter effect. So what if your opponent just tries to wait it out and stall until the ability is no longer active? Well, that's where this loadout's first ability comes in, because this one applies the projectiles on shatter effect, and then it applies the shatter effect. So it immediately shatters it and causes it to launch all those projectiles. So we'll see how that goes. It's hard to say for sure if that'll be something that's easy to recover from or not. Only one way to find out. So those are all the standard loadouts in the game, but I can't wait to hear everybody's suggestions for loadouts. We've already had some great ones. In fact, I would say like a good 50% of the loadouts and abilities which I've just spoken about are thanks to these 2 fine people in the Discord server. So if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear them. And if you want to test out your suggestions yourself, you can even mod them into the game by making your own loadout. Like I said, there's a guide on the wiki, but you don't have to feel obligated to do that. If you just want to suggest something, go for it. No matter how crazy you might think it is, just throw it out there. If you're worried about like, oh, I don't know, would this be feasible? Would this be possible? You might be surprised. Just throw your ideas out there. I appreciate them all, and I appreciate you watching this video. Don't forget to join that Discord server. Polymino is an early access game after all, so that's a great place to provide any feedback or suggestions you have. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next video. Peace. And the third ability, there's an airplane outside. Next up, we got another plane, man. So now they have to... Another plane. There's another one. I'm gonna install a SAM site in my backyard.